Kiana Brooks, 12, stands proud in Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 3, clutching her sleek wooden case, a solar-powered drone that just won her school's science fair. She's grinning, ready to fly to Houston, when sirens scream. 2 cops burst in, guns drawn, shouting her name. Her prize crashes, splintering on the tile. Captain Victor Hensley smirks nearby, eyes cold. Why target her? The crowd gasps, stunned. This moment, born from a simple victory, will scar her trust and reshape her future. What's Hensley hiding? Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. And if you stand for justice over prejudice, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that expose the truth. Kiana Brooks stood frozen in the middle of O'Hare's Terminal 3, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest as the echo of sirens faded into a tense, buzzing silence. Her wooden case, the one holding her solar-powered drone, lay shattered. At her feet, jagged splinters of her hard work glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. She was 12 years old, barely 5 feet tall, with tight braids pulled back from her glowing brown face, still riding the high of her science fair win. She'd spent months on that drone, tweaking circuits until her fingers ached, painting the wings with a steady hand, dreaming of showing it off to her aunt in Houston. Now 2 cops loomed over her, their shadows stretching across the cracked remains of her triumph. Officer Tate, a burly man with a shaved head and a scowl etched into his leathery skin, gripped his holster like he was itching to draw. Beside him, Officer Mills, younger with nervous green eyes and a buzz cut still stiff from the academy, shifted his weight, glancing around like he wasn't sure how he'd ended up here. Travelers clustered nearby, some clutching suitcases, others fumbling with phones, their whispers a low hum that made Kiana's skin prickle. She opened her mouth, voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside her. "What's going on? I didn't do anything wrong." Her words hung in the air, sharp and clear, cutting through the murmurs. She wasn't about to let them see her shake. Not yet. That's when Captain Victor Hensley stepped forward, his boots clicking on the tile with a rhythm that screamed authority. He was a wall of a man, 6 feet of muscle packed into a pristine white pilot's uniform, his buzz cut graying at the edges, his face carved with lines that told stories of too many flights and too little patience. His hazel eyes narrowed, locking onto Kiana like she was a puzzle he didn't trust. He crossed his arms, the 4 gold stripes on his sleeve catching the light, a badge of power he wore like armor. "That case," he said, his voice low and gravelly, pointing at the wreckage with a thick finger. "It's oversized. Looks like a weapon to me. What's a kid like you doing hauling something like that through my terminal?" His lips curled into a sneer, the kind that said he'd already made up his mind before she could even blink. Kiana's stomach twisted, but she squared her shoulders, refusing to shrink. "It's not a weapon. It's my science project. A drone. I won first. Place at school. I'm just taking it to Houston." Her tone was firm, her dark eyes meeting his without flinching. She'd faced down bullies before, kids who mocked her for being the only black girl in the robotics club. This was different, though. This was a grown man with a title, and he wasn't backing off. Hensley didn't budge. He tilted his head, sizing her up like she was a stray dog that didn't belong. "A drone, huh? Convenient story. You expect me to believe that? Kids don't build drones, not ones that look like that." He gestured at the broken case, dismissing her months of late nights, her soldering burns, her pride, with a flick of his wrist. The crowd shifted, a few people muttering agreement, others shaking their heads, but no one stepped in. Kiana's chest tightened. She wasn't loud, wasn't rude, just a girl trying to explain herself. "It's true. Check my ticket. I'm flying out in an hour. It's all cleared with security." Her voice rose slightly, not in anger but in desperation, hoping someone would listen. Officer Tate snorted, his meaty hand still hovering near his gun. "Cleared, huh? We'll see about that." He glanced at Hensley, waiting for the nod. Mills, the rookie, looked less certain, his fingers twitching on his radio, but he didn't speak up. Hensley's smirk widened, a predator sensing weakness. "I don't buy it. You're alone. No parents, lugging that thing around. Looks suspicious. I've seen enough in my 30 years flying to know when something's off." His words dripped with certainty, the kind that didn't need facts, just a gut twisted by years of seeing the world through a narrow lens. Kiana's mind raced. She wasn't alone, not really. Her dad worked at the airport, some kind of maintenance guy, she thought. He'd dropped her off at the curb an hour ago, promising to check in before her flight. But she didn't have time to call him now, not with these men closing in. "I'm not lying," she said, her voice cracking just a little, betraying the fear she'd been holding back. "Ask the gate agent." She saw it. "It's just a project." Hensley didn't even glance at the counter. He leaned closer, his breath sour with coffee and arrogance. "I don't need to ask anyone. I'm the one keeping this place safe. And you? You're a risk." The word hit her like a slap, heavy with meaning she couldn't fully grasp, but felt deep in her bones. A risk. Because she was black? Because she was young? Because she dared to carry something she'd built with her own hands? She wanted to scream, to demand why, but the words stuck in her throat as Hensley straightened up, turning to the cops. "Cuff her. We're not taking chances." Tate moved fast, yanking Kiana's arms behind her back before she could react. Cold metal bit into her wrists as the zip ties clicked tight, pinching her skin. She gasped, the pain sharp and real, but she bit her lip, refusing to give Hensley the satisfaction of tears. Mills hesitated, his pale face flushing as he met her eyes for a split second, then looked away, ashamed but silent. "This isn't right," Kiana said, her voice trembling but loud enough for the crowd to hear. "I didn't do anything." A woman in a red coat gasped, clutching her purse. A man with a beard started filming, his phone shaking in his hand. "She's just a kid," someone muttered. But the words drowned in the shuffle as Tate tightened his grip, pulling her toward the security lane. Hensley followed, his stride confident, his chest puffed out like he'd just saved the day. "Should've thought about that before you brought that thing in here," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, painting her as the villain in his little drama. The terminal buzzed with chaos now, a swarm of voices rising and falling. A teenage girl, in a hoodie typed furiously on her phone, her thumbs a blur. An older man in a suit shook his head, muttering about overreach, but no one stopped it. Kiana's sneakers squeaked on the floor as Tate dragged her past the check-in desks, her broken case left behind like trash. She twisted her head, catching glimpses of faces, some shocked, some curious, a few nodding like they agreed with Hensley. Her cheeks burned with humiliation, the weight of 100 eyes pressing down on her. She wasn't a criminal, wasn't a threat, but that's what they saw now thanks to him. Her drone, her pride was gone, and she was in cuffs, all because this man couldn't see past her skin. "You're wrong," she said, her voice cutting through the noise aimed straight at Hensley. "You'll see." He didn't turn, didn't flinch, just kept walking, his back a wall of white fabric and unchecked power. Kiana's mind spun as they hauled her toward a gray door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." She thought of her dad again, his quiet smile, his promise to always have her back. He'd fix this, wouldn't he? But doubt crept in, cold and heavy. What if he couldn't? What if this was just the start? The door swung open, and Tate shoved her inside, the clang of it shutting behind her echoing in her ears. Hensley stood, outside, arms crossed, watching through the glass like a king surveying his kingdom. He thought he'd won, thought he'd put her in her place. Kiana clenched her fists, the plastic ties digging deeper, and promised herself she wouldn't break. Not for him, not for anyone. But as the room swallowed her, the weight of what had just happened settled in, a storm brewing she couldn't yet see the end of. Kiana Brooks stumbled into the dimly lit holding room, her wrists throbbing where the zip ties cut into her skin, her sneakers scuffing the cold concrete floor. Officer Tate shoved her forward, his meaty hand heavy on her shoulder, while Officer Mills lingered by the door, his green eyes darting nervously between her and the cracked window overlooking Terminal 3. The air smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant, a stark contrast to the bustling chaos she'd just been ripped from. Her broken wooden case sat abandoned out there, a casualty of Captain Victor Hensley's wrath. But here, in this cramped box of a room, she was alone with 2 cops, and a sinking feeling she couldn't shake. She twisted around, her braids swinging, and locked eyes with Tate. "Please just listen. That was my drone. My science project. I worked on it for months. It's not a bomb, or anything crazy." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from the ache of seeing her creation trashed. She'd poured her soul into that drone, late nights hunched over her desk, soldering wires until her eyes burned. painting the wings with a tiny brush until they gleamed like a bird in flight. It was her ticket to proving she belonged, and now it was rubble. Could they even understand what that meant to a 12-year-old girl like her? Tate didn't flinch. His square jaw tightened, and he pulled a pocket knife from his belt, the blade glinting under the flickering bulb overhead. "We'll see what you're hiding," he grunted, stepping closer. Kiana's heart lurched. "No, wait. You'll break it more. It's delicate. Please, just look inside first." Her plea hung there, desperate and raw, but Tate's face stayed, stone cold. He knelt by the door where a security guard had dumped the splintered case, its lid hanging by a single hinge. With a quick, brutal flick, he sliced through the leather straps she'd added for style, peeling it open like he was gutting a fish. The drone spilled out, a mess of twisted metal and cracked plastic. Its solar panels shattered, its hand-painted, wings bent at sickening angles. Tiny gears rolled across the floor, clinking pitifully. Kiana's breath caught, a lump rising in her throat. She'd wired those lights herself, stayed up past midnight to get the hum just right. Now it was a corpse, and Tate didn't even blink. What kind of man could destroy a kid's dream without a second thought? Captain Hensley swaggered in then, his boots thudding like a judge's gavel, his white uniform pristine against the grimy walls. He towered over the scene, arms crossed, his buzz cut casting a sharp shadow. "Looks suspicious to me," he said, his voice a low growl, dripping with disdain. He didn't bother inspecting it, didn't touch the wreckage. Instead, he lifted one heavy boot and brought it down hard, stomping the drone's frame into the concrete. A sickening crunch filled the room as the last intact wing snapped, the sound echoing in Kiana's ears like a gunshot. She lunged forward, a cry escaping her lips. "Stop! Why are you doing this?" But Tate grabbed her arm, yanking her back, the zip ties biting deeper. Hensley smirked, grinding his heel into the debris for good measure. "Protocol. Can't take risks with stuff like this. You should have known better." His words were a slap, casual and cruel, as if her months of work were nothing, as if she was nothing. Did he even see her, or just the color of her skin? The door creaked as a security guard poked his head in, a wiry guy with a patchy beard and a nervous twitch. "Captain, people out there are getting loud, they're filming." Hensley's smirk faltered for a split second, but he waved the guard off. "Let 'em. I'm in charge here. They'll see I'm keeping this place safe." He turned back, to Kiana, his hazel eyes narrowing. "You're lucky I don't haul you straight to juvie." She stared at him, her chest heaving, anger bubbling up past the hurt. "Safe from what? A science project? I won a competition with that. It's not a threat. You're wrong." Her voice cracked, but it carried, loud enough to bounce off the walls. Mills shifted uncomfortably, his boots squeaking, but Tate just snorted. "Keep talking, kid. Doesn't change the facts." "What facts?" Kiana wanted to scream. There were none, just a pilot's hunch and a system that let him run wild. How could they twist her pride into something dangerous? Hensley nodded at Tate, a silent command, and the cop tightened his grip, dragging Kiana toward a metal chair bolted to the floor. She stumbled, her knees scraping the rough surface, but she didn't sit. Not yet. "You can't do this." "I have rights. My dad works here, he'll tell you." Her words were a lifeline, a flicker of hope. Her dad, Marcus, was out there somewhere, probably fixing a conveyor belt or something. He'd dropped her off with a hug and a promise to check her gate. He'd know what to do, right? Hensley chuckled, a dry, bitter sound. "Your dad, huh? Doesn't matter who he is, this is my call." He leaned in close, his breath hot on her face. "You don't belong here lugging that junk around. Next time, think twice." The threat landed heavy, a promise of more to come. Kiana's stomach knotted. Belong? She'd been to O'Hare 100 times, waving at workers who knew her by name. Why did he get to decide she didn't fit? Tate shoved her into the chair, the cold steel biting through her jeans, and stepped back, crossing his arms like a bouncer. Mills hovered near the door, his radio crackling with static, his face pale. Outside, the noise swelled, a roar of voices, filtering through the thick glass. "She's just a kid," someone shouted, the words muffled but sharp. A woman's voice followed, high and furious. "This is insane!" Kiana's pulse raced, a spark of relief igniting. People saw. They cared. Maybe this would end soon. But Hensley didn't budge. He strode to the window, peering out at the growing crowd, his jaw tight. Bunch of bleeding hearts, they'll get over it. He turned back, pointing at the smashed drone. That's what happens when you step out of line. Remember that. His tone was final, a king laying down law, and Kiana's hope flickered. Was anyone really coming to stop this? The guard returned, sweat beading on his forehead. Captain, it's getting worse. Phones everywhere. They're yelling about lawsuits. Hensley's eyes flashed, but he shrugged. Let 'em yell. I've got 30 years in this game. They can't touch me. He glared at Kiana, his smirk returning. You, though. You're done here. He nodded at Tate again, and the cop grabbed her arm, hauling her up. Time to move, Tate said, his voice flat, like he was clocking out of a shift. They dragged her toward a back exit, away from the crowd, the drone's remains left in a heap. Kiana twisted, catching one last glimpse of it, her heart sinking. Months of work, gone. Her victory, stolen. And for what? Because she was black and proud? Because Hensley couldn't stand a girl like her shining? As the door slammed shut behind her, the crowd's noise faded, replaced by the hum of a hallway, lined with flickering lights. Kiana's mind spun, replaying Hensley's sneer, Tate's knife, the crunch of her drone. She wasn't crying, not yet, but the weight of it all pressed down, a storm she couldn't outrun. Her dad's face flashed in her mind, his steady hands, his quiet strength. He'd fix this, wouldn't he? But doubt gnawed at her, cold and relentless. What if he couldn't? What if Hensley's power stretched further than she knew? Hey, drop a comment with number 1 if you think Hensley's dead wrong for smashing Kiana's dreams over nothing but his own bias. Hit that like button if you're raging at this injustice, and subscribe if you're ready to see this fight unfold. Was Kiana's hope in her dad enough, or is something bigger about to crash into her world? Kiana Brooks sat slumped in the metal chair, her wrists raw from the zip ties, her breath shallow as the holding room's stale air pressed against her chest. The back exit door loomed ahead, its chipped paint a dull gray under the flickering hallway lights, where Officer Tate stood ready to haul her deeper into this nightmare. Officer Mills lingered behind, his boots scuffing the concrete, his young face tight with unease. The echo of the crowd's outrage had faded, leaving only the hum of a distant air conditioner and the thud of her own heartbeat. Her drone, her pride, lay in pieces back in the terminal, crushed under Captain Victor Hensley's boot like it was nothing. She clenched her fists, the plastic ties digging in, and pictured her dad, Marcus, out there somewhere in his faded work jacket, fixing a baggage cart or unclogging a drain. He'd dropped her off with a quick hug, his calloused hands warm on her shoulders, promising to check her gait before takeoff. He'd know what to do, wouldn't he? But the minutes stretched, and doubt crept in, cold and heavy. What if he was too busy, too small in this massive airport, to stop a man like Hensley? Then it came, a voice like thunder rolling through stone, booming from the overhead speakers and rattling the room's thin walls. Release Kiana Brooks now. This is Marcus Brooks, CEO of O'Hare. The words hit like a shockwave, deep and commanding, slicing through the tension with a force that made Tate freeze mid-step. Mills's head snapped up, his green eyes wide, his radio slipping from his shaky grip to clatter on the floor. Kiana blinked, her mind scrambling to catch up. CEO, her dad, the guy who packed her peanut butter sandwiches and grumbled about early shifts. The door burst open, hinges groaning, and there he was, Marcus Brooks, striding in like a storm breaking loose. He wasn't in his usual work gear, no grease-stained overalls or toolbox in hand. Instead, he wore a crisp navy suit, tailored sharp. Against his broad frame, his dark skin gleaming under the lights, his bald head held high. At 6'3", he filled the space, his presence a wall of quiet fury that made the room shrink. Kiana's jaw dropped, her breath catching as he locked eyes with her, his brown gaze steady and fierce. Tate stumbled back, his meaty hands fumbling at his belt, while Mills pressed himself against the wall, looking like a kid caught sneaking cookies. Marcus didn't pause, didn't shout, just moved with a purpose that parted the air. He reached Kiana in 3 long strides, pulling a pocket knife from his suit jacket, its handle polished ebony, and knelt beside her. "Hold still, baby girl," he murmured, his voice soft now. Just for her. The blade flashed, quick and precise, cutting through the zip ties with a snap. They fell to the floor, useless scraps of plastic. and Kiana flexed her wrists, red marks blooming where they'd bitten. Her skin. She lunged forward, throwing her arms around his neck, her braids brushing his collar as she buried her face in his chest. His suit smelled of cedar and strength, and for a moment, the world steadied. "Daddy," she whispered, relief flooding her, washing away the sting of Hensley's cruelty. She was safe. He'd come for her just like he always had. Marcus stood, lifting her with him, his arm a shield around her shoulders as he turned to face the room. Captain Victor Hensley stood framed in the doorway, his white uniform stark against the gray hall, his buzz cut casting a jagged shadow. His hazel eyes widened, his smirk gone, replaced by a slack-jawed stare that made him look smaller, almost fragile. His thick fingers twitched at his sides, the gold stripes on his sleeve dull in the dim light. "You're Brooks," he stammered, his gravelly voice cracking, the confidence drained out of it. Marcus stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking on the concrete, each sound a hammer striking steel. "That's right, and you just detained my daughter without cause, in my airport." His tone was low, controlled, but it carried a weight that pinned Hensley in place. Kiana watched, her heart swelling, as her dad towered over the man who'd crushed her drone, who'd branded her a threat for no reason but his own twisted lens. Hensley's mouth opened, then closed, his lips flapping like a fish out of water. "I didn't know," he managed, the words tumbling out, weak and hollow. Marcus's eyes narrowed, dark pools of fury that didn't blink. "You didn't know. You didn't care. You saw a black girl with something you couldn't understand and you decided she was guilty. That's not ignorance, Hensley. That's you." His voice rose, not loud but sharp, cutting through the room like a blade. Kiana felt the words sink in, a truth she'd felt but couldn't name until now. Hensley hadn't asked questions, hadn't checked her story, just acted because to him she didn't belong. Marcus pointed a finger, steady and unyielding. "You're done here. I promise you that." The threat landed, heavy and real, a vow etched in the air between them. Kiana's chest lifted, a spark of pride igniting. Her dad wasn't just some worker. He was the boss, and he was fighting for her. The hallway outside erupted, a wave of sound crashing through the open door. Travelers pressed against the glass, their faces a blur of shock and anger, phones held high, capturing every second. "That's her dad!" a woman shouted, her voice piercing the din. "Let her go!" a man bellowed, his fist pounding the air. The noise swelled, a chorus of support that made Kiana's skin tingle. She glanced up at Marcus, his jaw tight, but his eyes soft when they met hers. "You okay?" he asked, his hand squeezing her shoulder. She nodded, a small smile breaking through the exhaustion. "Yeah, now I am." The crowd's cheers grew louder, a roar that shook the walls, and for the first time since the sirens, Kiana felt the weight lift. They saw her, really saw her, and they were on her side. Hensley shrank back, his shoulders hunching, his face pale as the reality hit. He'd messed with the wrong girl. Marcus guided her toward the door, his arm steady, a rock she could lean on. "Let's get you out of here," he said, his voice a lifeline pulling her from the chaos. Kiana nodded, her sneakers squeaking as she matched his stride, the crowd parting like a sea before them. Hensley stayed rooted, his boots glued to the floor, his hands trembling just enough to make the brass buttons on his uniform clink. "This isn't over," he muttered, barely audible. But Marcus didn't turn, didn't give him the satisfaction. Kiana glanced back, catching the pilot's glare, a flicker of something dark in his eyes. She ignored it, focusing on her dad's strength, the way he moved like nothing could stop him. They stepped into the terminal, the cheers washing over, her like sunlight, warm and bright. She was free. Her dad was here and Hensley was finished. Or so she thought. The holding room faded behind them, its cold walls a memory as they crossed into the bustling heart of O'Hare. Kiana's wrists ached. Her drone was gone, but she had Marcus, and that felt like enough. Travelers clapped, some shouting her name, others filming with shaky hands. A little boy in a Cubs cap waved, his grin wide, and Kiana waved back, her spirit lifting. She'd won this round, hadn't she? Hensley's power had crumbled, his smirk wiped clean by her dad's voice. She leaned into Marcus, his suit jacket brushing her cheek, and let herself believe it was over. The nightmare was done. The storm had passed. But as they moved through the crowd, a shadow lingered in her mind, a whisper of doubt she couldn't shake. Hensley's muttered words echoed, faint but persistent. What did he mean? This isn't over. She pushed it down, clinging to the moment, unaware that the real fight was just beginning. Kiana Brooks walked beside her father, Marcus, through the crowded expanse of O'Hare's Terminal 3, her sneakers sticking slightly to the polished floor, her wrists still tingling from where the zip ties had been cut away. The cheers of the crowd lingered in her ears, a warm buzz that wrapped around her like a blanket after the cold nightmare of the holding room. Travelers clapped as they passed, their faces a mix of awe and anger, some still filming with phones held high. A woman in a green scarf nodded at her, eyes fierce with support, while a teenage boy in a hoodie gave her a thumbs up, his grin wide. Kiana's chest swelled.